Hello, welcome back to Fantasy Forge. I'm Cameron Holt, and today we're going to be comparing some things. Specifically, we're going to be comparing these Games Workshop, Warhammer, Citadel, miniature paints with this Tester's Rust-Oleum brand miniature paints that I found at my local hobby store. What's the difference, you're asking? I would also like to know, because this came in a pack of 9 for about $15, and this came in a pack of 10 for about $45. So we're gonna pit these bad boys head to head and see if it's really worth the extra bucks. So, without further ado, let's get painting. We'll start with the cheap stuff on Mind Flayer number 1. I didn't realize when I was buying it, but all of the cheap paint was glossy, which isn't a huge deal for this particular mini, but it would have been nice if they mentioned that on the package. Strike one, testers. I'm using the closest colors I can from the two brands and the same brushes for each mini. Step 1 is mixing up a skin tone. I'm going for a nice light purple for our tentacle friends. Turns out half the cheap paints I bought were actually enamel paints and not acrylics, so I'll have to thin those with the included thinner and hope that they play well together. Spoilers, they don't. Finally, it's time to start painting. My first impressions are that the cheap stuff doesn't really show up great against the black primer, but maybe we can remedy that with some dry brushing or other techniques later on. While that layer dries, let's move on to the pricey stuff. I happen to have a purple base in the Citadel paints, but I want to make sure that it's a fair comparison, so I'll use the same color mixing techniques as I did previously. Now, these paints did mix together a lot better, but that's probably because one of them is an enamel paint. Look, the tester's paint really should have been clearer on the packaging. I will say the Citadel lids are a bit of a pain to close properly. But I do like the design with the little trough that keeps you from using up more paint than you need. I was really hoping this wouldn't be the case, but the Citadel paint is really nice. It's very pigmented, spreads well, and at least with this color combination, it only took one coat to get a nice flat color on the mini. Initial comparisons. Citadel's in the lead so far. Clearer color, tighter pigment, ease of use, and labeling. But let's keep going. I'm keeping both of these guys pretty close to the original Mind Flayer interpretation in the monster manual, so next we'll need a dark red for the inner cape and the front of the robes. The Tester acrylics almost behave more like a wash on this step, even though I barely thinned them with any water. An interesting effect, but kind of the opposite of what I'm going for here. In the end, I managed to get a decent coverage after about 3 layers. Let's see how Citadel handles as a dark red. Well, once again, Citadel paints are pretty impressive. It only took one coat to get the necessary coverage, a nice flat red. Now's probably a good time to remind you that I am not sponsored by Citadel, just genuinely impressed with the quality. I'm also not sponsored by Testers, but that's probably pretty obvious by this point. If anything, so far, this project has just shown me that I could really use a wet palette to save paint from drying out when I inevitably miss a section and need to go back and paint it with a previous color. But I digress. Now I'm going in with a pure black on each model to make sure that the spray primer I used is in a vastly different texture than the rest of the paints, and ultimately to make the minis more cohesive with themselves. I can also cover any areas where I was a little too loose with the brush earlier. First with the Citadels. And then with the Testers. First, I mixed up a light gray with the pricey stuff to dry brush the areas that I just painted black, bringing out the raised edges on the capes and clothing. For those who may not know, dry brushing is a technique where you get almost all of the paint off of your brush using a paper towel or your thumb, so that when you lightly brush over the raised edges of the Mini, you just leave a small hint of paint to highlight the piece. Then I did all that again with the testers. There honestly wasn't a huge difference in this step between the two brands, which was heartening. Now, one place where I can sing Tester's praises is in its metallics. Well, I'm sure the Citadel metallics are also nice, but I don't currently own any. But luckily, these cheaper ones are great. I'll be using this on both minis to get those shiny metal effects on the Mind Flayer's armor. But don't worry, I'll make sure that both sides, cheap and expensive, are balanced in the end in terms of use on both minis. I absolutely love metallic paints. It's like magic. But be sure not to overdo it. More often than not, you just need a light brushing over a good base coat of black or gray to get the right effect. This stuff is wonderful, and honestly, it almost makes the cheap stuff worth it in my opinion. Now it's time for a black wash. Remember how I said I'd balance out each product being used on both minis? Well, I went to make a black wash with the enamel paint and, well, turns out you can't really do that. So, to even things out, I'll be using Citadel's Nuln Oil shader on both minis. Now, I've heard everyone from Blackmagic Craft to random people in the tabletop Facebook groups I'm in swear by this stuff. And after using it, I can honestly see why. This stuff is great. You can use it selectively to shade sections, or if you're like me, just slap it over the whole mini, and it just always seems to find the right place to settle and dry. If you're gonna splurge on anything you see in this video, I'd say make it this bad boy. The last step is just to go in on each piece with a lighter purple and dry brush the face and hands to bring out the detail in the eyes, tentacles, and fingers. Oh, and remembering to turn the lights on. This time with the tester paint, I actually used a blue acrylic instead of a blue enamel. The result was glossy, but easier to mix at least. And with that, we just need to let these tentacle boys dry before we get to the overly dramatic reveal. So first up, we've got the Testers brand Rust-Oleum Corporation cheaper paints. Now, these paints aren't bad. If you've got some unpainted minis that you need to get painted, you're on a budget, this is a very viable option. Just make sure you look at the top of the package where it lists all the colors to make sure you're getting either gloss or matte, depending on what you're looking for. I didn't. Learn from my mistakes. Also, even after 3 coatings of red paint, I still never got a very clean, flat color on the cape or the front, and that could just be the red gloss that I have, but I don't know. It's a lot of extra work and a lot of extra time if you're trying to do this quick. If you've got a game tonight or tomorrow, that one's gonna put you in a rush. Now, in my mind, the clear winner, Citadel. These things are amazing. There's a huge variety of them. I just use the base paints for this project, but they also offer a wide variety of different types of paints. They've got shaders, which are essentially washes, like we used the Nuln oil here. They also have different effects paints that do different things, and there's also some that are specific for dry brushing. There's a couple more, and I may touch on those in a future video, so let me know in the comments down below if you're interested in that. But that's gonna do it for this one. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, you know what to do. There's a button down there. You can push it. I believe in you. Again, thank you for watching. I'll see all of you in the next video. But until then, stay safe out there, adventurers.